Earth will kneel. The alien emissary's voice boomed, its metallic tone laced with contempt. The Galactic Empire demands tribute and surrender. Your people will serve, or you will burn. The ultimatum spread like wildfire, sparking fear and anger in equal measure. The people of Earth had only glimpsed the vastness of the Empire's forces, an armada of ships that could blot out stars, and soldiers bred for war, impervious to mercy or defeat. For decades, the Empire had ignored humanity, dismissing them as insignificant, but now Earth had drawn its attention. What had changed? No one knew for certain, but the terms were clear: submit or face annihilation. In the halls of Earth's leadership, the tension was evident. A meeting of the United Earth Security Council had convened in secret. Though the world's governments were united by one shared truth, they were outmatched. Representatives from every nation sat at the long oval table, their faces shadowed by the weight of the decision before them. General Jim Trent, commander of Earth's combined military forces, stood at the head of the room, his eyes hard with resolve. He had spent his life preparing for an alien invasion, though nothing could have prepared him for the Empire's overwhelming strength. "We cannot negotiate with them," Trent declared, his voice cutting through the murmur of anxious voices. "If we give in now, we'll be nothing but slaves. But if we resist, we'll be wiped out," countered President Liu of the Eastern Coalition. Her tone was calm, but the fear behind her words was unmistakable. "Our defenses are a joke compared to what they're capable of. We've seen their fleets." Trent's jaw clenched. He knew the odds. Earth's armies, however advanced by human standards, were little more than a nuisance to the Empire. The alien forces had technology centuries ahead of humanity, weapons that could level cities in moments. Resistance seemed futile. Yet there was a fire in Trent's eyes that refused to die. "There's another option," he said, pausing to let the words sink in. The room fell silent. "We hit them where they least expect it." The suggestion hung in the air like a storm about to break. The idea was unthinkable, audacious, even, but it was the only sliver of hope left. Trent continued, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the leaders before him. "We take the fight to them. A covert strike, deep in their territory. We raid the Galactic King's castle, destroy their command center, and cripple their leadership." The room erupted in disbelief. The Galactic King's castle was a fortress, buried within the heart of the Empire's most protected system. Even thinking about infiltrating it was madness. "This is suicide," one of the diplomats whispered, but Trent shook his head. "It's our only chance. They won't see it coming. A small, elite team, our best soldiers, trained to operate without mercy. If we strike fast, we can decapitate the Empire before they unleash their full power on us." Liu leaned forward, her face pale but determined. "And if we fail?" Trent met her gaze. "If we fail, then we go down fighting." In a darkened corner of the room, Major John Kane listened quietly. He was the commander of Earth's most feared combat unit, a group of highly trained soldiers hardened by battles against alien threats over the years. Unlike the others in the room, he didn't flinch at the plan. Kane had seen what aliens could do, and he had become very, very good at killing them. Without a word, Kane rose to his feet, drawing the attention of the room. "We'll do it," he said simply. His voice was cold, emotionless. "Just give us the green light." A heavy silence followed. Everyone knew what Kane's team was capable of, and they knew this was their last, desperate play. Slowly, one by one, the leaders nodded their approval. Trent turned to Kane, his expression grim but resolute. "Then it's settled. The mission is yours." As the meeting ended, the weight of the decision pressed down on everyone in the room. The Galactic Empire had given its ultimatum, and humanity had responded with one final gamble. The fate of Earth now rested in the hands of men like Major Kane, ruthless, relentless, and ready to do whatever it took to strike back. And so, with the Empire's shadow looming over Earth, humanity's secret war began. The briefing room was dim, the only light spilling from the holographic projection floating above the central table, a rotating image of the Galactic Empire's inner territories. Every detail of the Emperor's fortress, a sprawling citadel carved into a black asteroid, was etched into the display. It looked impregnable, an ironclad heart of the Empire. To many in the room, it felt more like a tomb. Major John Kane stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed, scanning the faces of his team. 12 men, the best of Earth's elite forces, hardened by years of combat. They didn't flinch. They didn't ask questions. This was what they were trained for. Our target, Kane began, his voice steady, is the heart of the Galactic Empire. The Emperor's fortress. We take it down, we cut off the head of the beast. The men exchanged glances, silent but resolute. For them, this wasn't a suicide mission, it was just another operation, albeit the most dangerous one yet. Each of them had killed aliens before, species far more dangerous than humans, and none of them had hesitated to spill blood. They were humanity's answer to an unforgiving galaxy. General Jim Trent stood beside Kane, his expression grave. You're not just assassinating the Emperor. You'll be planting a device, a fusion destabilizer, that will destroy the entire asteroid. This mission is about making a statement. We're showing the Empire that humanity won't just roll over and die. He tapped a button on the table, and the hologram zoomed in on the fortress. The asteroid fortress had multiple layers of defenses, energy shields, sentry drones, and elite guards genetically engineered for combat. It would take more than brute force to break through. You'll enter through a maintenance shaft here, Trent continued, pointing to a narrow opening in the hologram. Then proceed through the lower levels. Avoid detection as long as possible. The Emperor's throne room is at the core, and that's where you'll plant the device. Timing is everything. You'll only have minutes to escape once the detonator is armed. Kane nodded, memorizing every detail. This wasn't just a mission of skill and violence, it was a test of precision. One misstep, and they'd all be vaporized in the blast. How do we get past their defenses? Sergeant Ortiz, a lean man with a knack for sabotage, asked. Trent's lips tightened. The Empire's technology is advanced, but they rely heavily on their security systems. We'll be deploying a series of cloaking satellites around the asteroid to jam their sensors. You'll have a narrow window of undetected entry, about 10 minutes. After that, you're on your own. The room was thick with tension, but no one voiced doubt. This wasn't a mission for hesitation. There's another layer to this, Trent added. This mission is classified to the highest level. If you're caught, there won't be a rescue. Earth can't afford to engage the Empire head-on. You'll be disavowed. Kane met Trent's gaze. Understood. We weren't expecting a safety net. For Kane's team, this wasn't just another mission. It was a chance to carve their names into the galaxy's history. They weren't just soldiers, they were humanity's last hope, and they would leave their mark on the Empire, even if it cost them everything. As the details of the operation sank in, the soldiers began their preparations. Each man had his role, finely tuned for maximum efficiency. Ortiz, the saboteur, meticulously checked the explosives, ensuring every wire was in place. Private Winston, the team's tech specialist, fine-tuned the cloaking devices that would keep them invisible for those crucial minutes. Each soldier was a piece of a larger machine. But in the back of Kane's mind, there was a flicker of unease. He wasn't one for doubts, but the sheer magnitude of what they were about to do was unlike anything they'd faced before. He wasn't worried about dying, that was part of the job. But if they failed, Earth would fall. There wouldn't be another chance. As the soldiers packed their gear, Trent pulled Kane aside. There's something else you need to know, he said, his voice low, as if the walls had ears. There's a contingency plan in place if this mission goes south. Kane raised an eyebrow. A contingency? Trent's face was unreadable. Earth can't afford to lose. If your team fails, we have a backup. A last resort. But it'll cost us everything. Kane didn't need to ask what everything meant. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. There was no going back now. Don't let it come to that, Trent added, his tone grim. Kane's gaze hardened. It won't. With that, the mission was set. 12 soldiers, a plan that teetered on the edge of impossible, and a galaxy hanging in the balance. The men of Kane's unit knew their part: silent, efficient, and ruthless. The blackness of space surrounded the soldiers as their stealth ship coasted through the Galactic Empire's core system. Major John Kane stood in the cockpit, his eyes locked on the growing shadow of the Emperor's fortress, an imposing citadel carved into a jagged asteroid. "Cloaking is stable," Private Winston whispered, hunched over the controls. "We're inside their sensor range, but they're blind to us." "Good," Kane muttered. "Let's keep it that way." The ship drifted toward the maintenance shaft marked in their briefing. The timing had to be perfect. The Empire's security system cycled every 5 minutes, leaving a brief window where the external shields dropped. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. "No," Kane ordered. The ship slipped inside the shaft just as the shields flickered back to life. The entire team remained silent, their breathing controlled, their minds focused. Kane led the way, his movements precise as he disengaged his harness and dropped into the narrow passage. One by one, his soldiers followed, their weapons held at the ready. "Keep it quiet," Kane reminded them, his voice barely above a whisper. The shaft was cold, the metal walls gleaming under the faint lights of their visors. Each man knew his role, moving with the grace and coordination of a well-oiled machine. Sergeant Ortiz took the lead, using his engineering skills to disable the alarms and cameras as they moved deeper into the fortress. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity, until they reached the lower levels of the citadel. The tension was palpable. Here, they were beyond the Empire's automated defenses. Any wrong move would alert the sentries and send the entire base into lockdown. Ortiz worked quickly to disable the final layer of security. He gave Kane a nod, signaling the way was clear. They continued forward, slipping through darkened corridors, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the armor they wore. The Emperor's throne room was close now, and Kane could feel the gravity of their mission press harder against his chest. "Movement ahead," whispered Private Reed, the team scout, as he raised his hand to signal a stop. Kane peered around the corner. Alien guards, tall, hulking creatures with armored skin, stood at attention, their weapons ready. They hadn't been part of the plan, and it was clear the Emperor had bolstered his defenses. The guards weren't moving, but their presence meant the element of surprise was fading fast. "We go silent," Kane ordered. He raised his silenced rifle, signaling the others to follow. The first shot dropped the guard on the left before it could react. The second shot found its mark on the right. Kane's men moved swiftly, taking down the sentries with deadly precision, their suppressed weapons no louder than a whisper. The bodies slumped to the ground, but the sound was muffled by the weight of the fortress itself. "Clear," Kane said, his heart pounding in his chest. The team advanced. As they reached the final corridor leading to the throne room, the air grew colder. There was an eerie stillness here, as though the fortress itself was holding its breath. Something wasn't right. Kane's instincts screamed at him, but there was no turning back now. The door to the throne room slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast, circular chamber. At the center, where the Emperor's throne should have been, was nothing but emptiness. The room was quiet, too quiet. "Where's the target?" Sergeant Ortiz asked. Kane stepped forward, scanning the room with narrowed eyes. There were no guards, no defenses. It was a ghost town. "It's a trap," Kane growled, his muscles tensing. "We've been set up." Before he could issue another command, the fortress shook violently. Red lights flashed along the walls, and a blaring alarm echoed through the corridors. The entrance slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside. "They knew we were coming," Winston said, his voice barely audible over the wail of the alarms. "Move!" Kane barked. "We have to get out of here before the whole place goes into lockdown." The team rushed toward the nearest exit, but it was too late. The floor trembled beneath them as alien soldiers poured into the corridor from all sides, cutting off their escape route. Kane's men formed a tight circle, their backs to each other, their weapons raised. "Hold the line," Kane ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The alien forces were relentless, but so were Kane's soldiers. They fought with a cold efficiency, mowing down the enemy in waves. But for every soldier they killed, 2 more took its place. The corridor was soon filled with the stench of blood and burning metal. As the firefight intensified, Kane knew they were running out of time. They were trapped, and their mission had failed. The Emperor had outplayed them, and now they were on borrowed time. He needed to find a way out, but the walls were closing in. "Fall back!" Kane shouted over the roar of battle, but in his gut, he knew there was no escape. The Empire was ready for them. The firefight raged around them, but Major John Kane could feel the weight of inevitability. His team was pinned down, surrounded by alien soldiers who showed no sign of relenting. The Emperor's trap had sprung with brutal efficiency. Every second brought more enemies, more weapons fire, and more death. Kane's men were falling, one by one, their bodies crumpling beneath the relentless onslaught. "We can't hold this position!" Sergeant Ortiz yelled over the deafening roar of blasters. His face was slick with sweat and blood, his voice strained from exhaustion. Kane's mind raced as he ducked behind a pillar, avoiding a barrage of plasma fire. His squad was running out of time, out of ammunition, and out of hope. The mission had failed, but the fight wasn't over, not yet. "Keep pushing forward!" Kane barked, his voice rough with fury. "We're not dying in this hole!" His team rallied, fighting back with everything they had left. Private Reed took down an alien soldier with a well-aimed shot to the head. Winston hurled an explosive, reducing a group of attackers to ash. But for every enemy they killed, more surged forward from the endless waves of reinforcements. Kane's mind flashed to Earth. Back home, billions of people were waiting, unaware of the doom that hovered above them. The Galactic Empire's war machine would soon descend upon humanity, erasing them from the galaxy like so many other conquered species. Kane knew what was at stake. He couldn't let that happen, not without giving everything he had left. Ortiz fell to his knees beside Kane, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. He had taken a hit, his armor charred and cracked. "What's the plan, Major?" Ortiz asked, his voice a mix of desperation and resolve. He was a soldier to the end, waiting for orders even as the walls closed in. Kane's mind was already working on the impossible. They were trapped, but they still had the fusion destabilizer, the bomb meant to destroy the Emperor's fortress. Originally, they were supposed to plant it deep within the throne room and escape. Now, escape was no longer an option. "We detonate the charge here," Kane said grimly, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Ortiz stared at him in disbelief. "We're still inside. That thing will wipe us out along with them." Kane wiped blood from his face, staring out at the advancing enemy. "There's no other way. We take them down with us." The words hung heavy in the air. There was no argument. Every man on the team knew what they had signed up for. They hadn't come here expecting to live, they came to end the Galactic Empire's grip on humanity, no matter the cost. "Set the charge," Kane ordered. "And arm the detonator." Winston, with shaking hands, pulled the fusion destabilizer from his pack. He began working with rapid precision, setting the timer and calibrating the device. Kane kept his rifle trained on the corridor, picking off any alien soldier who dared approach. The others formed a protective circle, their eyes sharp, their fingers steady on the triggers. Each second was bought with blood. Winston nodded, his face pale. "It's ready. We've got 5 minutes." Kane turned to his men. "You've all fought like hell. It's been an honor." There were no speeches, no final words of inspiration. These men had been together long enough to know that nothing more needed to be said. They were soldiers, bound by duty, and they would face their end with the same grim determination that had brought them this far. The countdown ticked away as the enemy pressed closer. Explosions rocked the corridor, walls crumbling as the alien soldiers advanced with relentless fury. Kane felt the heat of the battle, the sting of pain from a dozen minor wounds, but his focus never wavered. He fired round after round, his eyes locked on the enemy, until his rifle clicked empty. 3 minutes! Winston called out, his voice barely audible over the din. Kane drew his sidearm, taking down 2 more attackers with quick, lethal shots. The alien screams filled the air, a chorus of rage and desperation. But even they seemed to sense the inevitability of what was about to happen. Some of them hesitated now, their advance slowing. 1 minute! Winston shouted. Kane's heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, knowing that one day he would be called to make the ultimate sacrifice. And now, as the countdown approached its final seconds, he was ready. Detonate, Kane said, his voice steady. Winston pressed the button. The fusion destabilizer activated with a low hum, a pulse of energy rippling through the walls. Kane felt the floor tremble beneath his feet as the bomb's core reached critical mass. There was a brief moment of silence, as though the entire universe held its breath. Then the world exploded in a flash of white light. The fortress shattered, the asteroid disintegrating in a cataclysmic burst of energy. Kane's final thought wasn't of death, but of Earth. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity's will to fight. Even in their destruction, Kane and his men had struck a blow that would be felt across the galaxy. In the wake of the blast, there was only silence.